tonight on NewsCenter. Korea's main opposition bloc ends the world's longest filibuster to block a vote on a proposed anti-terrorism bill in the National Assembly. After being delayed upon Russia's request, the UN Security Council will vote on a resolution in less than 2 hours, one that would slap the toughest sanctions on North Korea. And Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton carve out dominant positions in their party nominating races on Super Tuesday, marching ever closer to a scorched earth general election clash. NewsCenter begins right now. It is 8 a.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in Barcelona, and 10 on a Wednesday night here in Seoul. Hello and welcome to our viewers all across the globe. You're watching Arirang NewsCenter. We kick things off in the nation's parliament. The longest filibuster in history came finally to an end a few hours ago. Since it was launched last Tuesday, that was more than a week ago. Now, for more on the latest, let's go live to our Shin Se-min at the National Assembly. She's been following this story from the very beginning. Now, Se-min, finally, the long-awaited end to the filibuster came just a couple of hours ago, which is later than initially announced by the opposition party. What is going on in Parliament now?
Yes, Kanyang, the main opposition Minjoo Party of Korea had put a full stop to its vote-blocking filibuster session at around 7:30 p.m. this evening. Now, an entire closure to the filibuster session came with the floor leader Lee Jong-gal's speech becoming the last one. Ironically, he's the one who also put the entire filibuster session in place last Tuesday. Now, the marathon filibuster initially initiated to put a stop on the passage of the counterterrorism bill has left a number of records behind. For one, a total of 39 lawmakers took turns to deliver their long speeches. Now, totaling the speeches altogether would be 192 hours and 25 minutes, easily surpassing a 58-hour session by Canada's New Democratic Party back in 2011. And the last speaker, Lee Jong-gal, as I've mentioned just now, spent the longest hours on the podium, speaking for 12 hours and 31 minutes. The Minjoo Party leadership had initially announced late Tuesday that they would end the delaying tactics by Tuesday, saying that the session should not stand as an obstacle to the upcoming parliamentary election next month. And we should also note that with the closure of the filibuster, the opposition party ended without being able to achieve its initial goal, which was to stop the passing of the counterterrorism bill.
Right, I mean, as you mentioned, with the filibuster coming to an end, the counterterrorism bill, which was the core of the more than a week-long filibuster, is to be addressed at the plenary session. Now, I know that the plenary session has kicked off, right?
Yes, just a little over half an hour ago, the lawmakers are back at the Assembly to vote on a number of contentious bills, and we are just learning now that the contentious counterterrorism bill just got voted on and were passed, so it has been enacted, and along with it, a number of other bills like the redrawn countries electoral map and a North Korean human rights bill will be also dealt during the plenary session. Now, as soon as the round-the-clock filibuster ended, the ruling Minjoo Party immediately held an emergency general meeting of these lawmakers at around 8 p.m. where they had discussed the order of which bills get voted on first. At this point, the order of the bills being voted on is crucial as the opposition party is suggesting the session handles the counterterrorism bill towards the end of the plenary voting session and put the redrawn constituency map in the beginning, while the ruling party is proposing the very opposite of that. That also means the opposition lawmakers could vote on the electoral map bill first and not be present for the voting of counterterrorism bill. Now, with the rival parties not backing down one bit even after the parliamentary session is back on track, it remains to be seen whether it'll be a full voting session or not. Kanyang?
Right, it looks like it will be a long night at the Parliament and a long night for you, Se-min. Thank you so much for that report. Now, 42 days, with only 42 days left until general elections next month, there may be a shift in the nation's political landscape, particularly in the opposition front. The interim leader of the main opposition, Minjoo Party of Korea, has proposed a surprise deal. Our EG1 has more on what may become the deciding factor come election time.
Korea's main opposition Minjoo Party leader Kim Jong-in suggested the other opposition party to join forces for the upcoming general election on Wednesday.
I propose the opposition parties to come together again. There is no time. We should not think individually, but think of the future of a democratic government and cooperate to bring victory to the opposition in the upcoming general election, as well as the presidential election in the coming years.
An insider from the Minjoo Party said the call to join forces was aimed at the minor opposition and recently created People's Party, mostly comprised of lawmakers who defected the main opposition Minjoo Party. The proposal may have surprised many, as Kim had been showing a negative stance regarding a unified opposition bloc. But lawmaker Park Soo-yeon, who is serving as chief of staff for the Minjoo Party, said the proposal has been long thought by Kim and emphasized the importance of cooperation between opposition parties to win the parliamentary elections in April. The suggestion also sparked different reactions among members of the People's Party. An Chol-soo, co-chairman of the party, said he is dubious about the reason Kim is suggesting unification at this point of time, and that he thinks the Minjoo Party should reorganize its internal structure first. The other co-chairman of the minor opposition party, Chun Jung-bae, adopted a more careful choice of words, saying that such proposals should not be answered with hastiness. Meanwhile, the People's Party welcomed on Wednesday political heavyweight Park Ji-won, previously a member of the main opposition Minjoo Party, and some lawmakers from the Donggyudong faction who were loyal to former President Kim Dae-jung. 이지원, Arirang News.
In less than 2 hours from now, the UN Security Council is expected to put to a vote a new resolution that would impose sanctions on North Korea in response to its latest nuclear tests and long-range missile launch. Well, joining me live in the studio is our foreign affairs correspondent, Kwon So-ah. Now, So-ah, we had expected this resolution to be adopted Tuesday afternoon local time, which was earlier this morning here in Korea, but that got delayed, and finally, we hope to see that getting adopted in a few hours.
Right, and most likely unanimously. Now, the meeting should kick off at 10 a.m. at the UN headquarters in New York, Wednesday local time, and which is midnight Thursday here in Seoul. The resolution will be adopted if none of the veto-wielding 5 permanent members object, which are the US, UK, China, Russia, and France, and at least 9 out of the 15 total members give a yes vote. Now, officials at Seoul's foreign ministry and UN diplomats have been hinting that every member state has agreed to the draft, as there is general consensus that Pyongyang should be harshly punished for its nuclear and missile tests, and that the tough new sanctions would be able to deter the regime from developing its weapons programs.
No, so despite that consensus, it took quite a long time. I mean, even longer than initially predicted for the U.S. to submit that new resolution and for all these countries to come together and put that to a vote.
Exactly, almost 2 months, in fact. And that was, for one, as you said, because the U.S. actually needed some time to get China on the same page. They needed some time to agree on the draft, which was also based on South Korea's request. But as we know, South Korea is currently not a member of the UNSC. But if we take a look at the chart here, we can see that it took only 5 days after the North's first nuclear test to adopt a resolution, and 18 days in 2009, 23 in 2013. Now, if a new resolution is passed an hour or two from now, it'll have taken 57 days. Now, although the resolution was expected to have been adopted before the end of February, Russia delayed the process, and the latest 19-hour postponement was said to have been requested by Moscow due to procedural reasons. Now, the conventional rule is that following the 15-member Council's agreement on a draft resolution, a so-called blue text is printed, upon which a vote must wait 24 hours. But even before that, Russia said it needed needed more time to review and study the draft. It's known that Russia made some small adjustments with the U.S. to the draft, but many experts say that had more to do with Moscow wanting to have more say in the draft than the content itself.
Right, so for more on what those may be and Russia's latest stance on the resolution slapping the strongest sanctions yet on North Korea, here's our Connie Kim.
Russia, a veto-wielding member of the UN Security Council, has been holding up a vote on a new resolution on North Korea. Even so, Russia's UN ambassador says the resolution is necessary because of the challenges coming from North Korea, indicating the new set of sanctions should pass unanimously when the 15-member Security Council votes on Wednesday morning at the UN headquarters in New York. Speaking to reporters in New York on Tuesday, Vitaly Churkin said Moscow had some concerns about the draft resolution that they've discussed with the U.S. delegation, adding that the U.S. had accommodated some, but not all, of their concerns. That's why Russia wanted changes made to the draft at the last minute, according to Japanese broadcaster NHK. A revised copy obtained by the broadcaster shows an exception has been made on a ban on aviation fuel to North Korea. The fresh set of sanctions will allow the sale and supply of aviation fuel to civilian North Korean aircraft. An official in charge of mineral resources trade between North Korea and Russia has also been dropped from the initial list of individuals and organizations subject to UN sanctions. With the change, 12 organizations and 16 individuals will be slapped with sanctions if the resolution passes as expected. Since North Korea carried out its nuclear test in early January, Security Council members put their heads together to draw up the strongest sanctions yet on Pyongyang. If adopted, mandatory inspections of cargo, an expansion of a weapons ban and a trade ban on coal, iron, and gold are expected to pressure the regime to give up its nuclear weapons program and encourage Pyongyang back to the negotiating table. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
So the sanctions indeed seem to be the harshest so far, and latest news is that China is already in preparation to implement such a punitive measure, Soa.
Right, Kanyang. In fact, according to Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency, officials said that Chinese banks in the northern city of Dandong halted the transfer of the Chinese yuan to North Korean banks. Now, branch offices of China's top 4 state-run banks and 6 commercial banks in the region are said to have received orders from their respective headquarters. Now, Dandong is a major channel of bilateral trade between North Korea and China. Now, this seems to show that China is sincerely committed to the effective implementation of the sanctions, one of the lingering concerns regarding the matter. But North Korea's closest ally had vowed to meet its role as an important UNSC permanent member also during recent bilateral talks with Seoul.
So this appears to be really the most that the international community can do to get its message through to Pyongyang. And hopefully this one will work as well, this time around. And so it looks like you will be working throughout the night tonight. Best of luck to you, and thank you for that report.
Yes, let's hope that there is not going to be any unexpected surprises again.
All right. Well, South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se urged the UN Security Council to promptly implement its new sanctions resolution on North Korea. The statement came after North Korea declared its intent to boycott the UN Human Rights Council Tuesday. Kim Mo-kyun tells us more.
South Korea called for the UN Security Council to expand tougher sanctions towards North Korea for its latest nuclear and long-range missile launch provocations, which violate UN Security Council resolutions and international norms. At the United Nations Conference on Disarmament in Geneva on Wednesday, Seoul's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se said that in order to completely stop Pyongyang's accelerating nuclear power, it is crucial for new sanctions to be implemented without any delay. The minister said that the regime has conducted 4 nuclear tests and launched 6 long-range missiles in the past decade, calling the communist state a serial offender that poses a serious regional threat.
North Korea's nuclear weapons and missile programs are the greatest threats to peace and security in my part of the world. If we are unable to stop Pyongyang's continued pursuit of a nuclear arsenal, it will fuel vicious cycle of a regional arms race in an already heavily armed region.
Yoon's statement comes a day after North Korean Foreign Minister Ri Su-yong announced that Pyongyang will ignore any decision made by the UN Human Rights Council, adding that the global body had become contaminated with political point scoring and selectivity. Regarding such announcement, the South Korean Foreign Minister said that it came possibly due to the international community's increasing pressure towards the regime's human rights situation. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
It was a big day over in the U.S. Presidential hopefuls Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton have extended their leads to capture their party's nominations. Bruce Harrison is live in the studio with me with the results of Super Tuesday. Now, Bruce, this was the 2016 campaign's biggest day of the state-by-state primary voting. Have the frontrunners put winning out of reach of their rivals, really?
Well, not quite yet, Kun-young. They'd like the rivals to believe that, though. But you have Trump, the billionaire real estate mogul, and you have former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton really digging in with big delegate pickups. But they're still both quite a ways off from winning a nomination.
And that's largely because the challengers picked up a number of crucial victories. How has Super Tuesday changed the race?
Sure, you're right. Well, let's start with the Republicans. You have Trump, who won 7 states and expanded a solid delegate count, but he didn't win Texas. And that's important because the GOP was really focused on the Lone Star State. It's the home state of challenger Senator Ted Cruz. And if Trump had taken that state, Republicans would be a lot more bleak about anyone beating the former reality TV star. But Cruz won Texas, and as a surprise, Alaska and Oklahoma as well. Now, that's good for Trump haters, but Cruz's wins complicate decisions for the GOP leadership. Most party heavyweights have been throwing their support behind Florida Senator Marco Rubio, a more mainstream candidate. But Rubio has just won 1 state, and Cruz said at a victory rally what many Republicans may be thinking if they want to defeat Trump, and that's the party needs to unite behind Cruz.
Tomorrow morning, we have a choice. So long as the field remains divided, Donald Trump's path to the nomination remains more likely. And that would be a disaster for Republicans, for conservatives, and for the nation.
On the Democratic side, Clinton predictably won the most states, 7 to Bernie Sanders' 4. Her victories came with more delegates, too. But Sanders reminded supporters in his home state of Vermont, which he won, that 35 states still have to vote.
You know, I have been all, and let me assure you that we are going to take our fight for economic justice, for social justice, for environmental sanity, for a world of peace to every one of those states.
Now, Bruce, what about from here on? I mean, where are the biggest battlegrounds left, and what can we expect to see from the Republican and Democratic parties?
Sure. Well, Trump is benefiting a lot right now from the split between his opposition, and that's main opposition, and that's Senators Rubio and Cruz. But it's unlikely either of these young senators are going to drop out of the race. Rubio finally did win a state in Super Tuesday, and he's been energizing his base to try and win in his home state, Florida.
The stakes are too high, and we are going to send the message that the party of Lincoln and Reagan and the presidency of the United States will never be held by a con artist.
Trump has a large lead in the polls in Florida, though, as well as many other delegate-heavy states. Republican candidates neurosurgeon Ben Carson and Ohio Governor John Kasich have yet to win a state, but intend to continue their campaigns. In the Democratic race, Sanders has no reason to drop out yet. With 4 victories and a near loss in Massachusetts, it's clear Clinton still has much work to do to secure the nomination.
But Bruce, statistically speaking, really, there are enough delegates that left that any challengers could win.
Sure, even someone like Ben Carson, but we see Trump leading in a lot of polls in states coming up, even some states that vote Saturday. And the Republican Party is in such disarray right now that it's hard to imagine them getting behind another candidate to challenge Trump in the long run.
Certainly shaping up to be a very interesting race this time around, and we'll have to wait and see how that turns out in November.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Bruce, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Well, Hallyu, or the Korean wave, has taken off in various ways in recent years, and now the Korean government is fostering that industry as a new growth engine for the country. Our Song Ji-sun explains how it plans to merge cultural content with its creative economy drive.
Speaking at the opening of an expo called Made in Korea, displaying cultural products like Korean food, crafts, and traditional clothing, President Park Geun-hye said that now is the time to create a convergence of traditional culture and modern technology to create new industries through culture. Noting that over 2 million people visited the Korean pavilion at the Milan Expo last year, President Park called for a renaissance of Korean culture.
우리 문화가 단순한 호기심을 넘어 폭넓은 사랑을 받고 인류의 문화 자산으로 발전해 갈 수 있음을 보여주는 생생한 증거들이 계속 나오고 있습니다. 분야 간 경계를 허물고 우리 고유의 전통 문화에 산업의 옷을 입혀서 경제 재도약의 기반을 마련하는 데에 힘을 모아주시기 바랍니다.
To promote the country's brand value, the government began certifying cultural products this year, and the expo showcases many of these items. The event will be open to the public from Thursday to Monday at Dongdaemun Design Plaza in Seoul and will travel to Gwangju and Busan in the coming weeks. President Park said the answer to realizing creative economy lies in culture and in bringing together the two key initiatives of our administration, cultural prosperity and the creative economy. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
A short-lived uptick in Korea's overall output ended after a solitary month as the manufacturing sector was hit hard by slowing global demand. As plunging exports continue to haunt the economy that's already struggling with sluggish domestic demand, pressure mounts for the government to introduce new stimulus. Hwang Ji-hye reports.
Korea's output across all industries was down 1.2% in January from the previous month, after going up over 1% in December of last year, breaking a 2-month downward streak. The figure sank again. Statistics Korea says the drop came from a fall in production in the mining and manufacturing sectors, which were hit hard by slumping outbound shipments. Korea's exports plunged for the 14th straight month in February, marking the longest downslide the country has ever posted and the third consecutive month of a double-digit drop. With that, experts say the outlook for Asia's fourth largest economy is dimming.
This year's projection for exports is still not bright, with global demand slowing, especially in emerging economies. And consumption and investment that had shown signs of a pickup late last year are now shrinking.
Facing the end of a temporary tax cut for automobiles in January that was introduced by the government to boost spending, retail sales actually dropped nearly 1.5% from the previous month. And some experts say more stimulus, including a budget supplement, is necessary to prop up the growth momentum and reach the government's 3% growth target. But with regard to using monetary policy, experts are rather skeptical.
It's better to fight against uncertainties with fiscal policies than monetary policies in current economic conditions, because adjusting the key rate has not been effective so far in boosting spending and investment.
So, in other words, people have been reluctant to spend for other reasons like post-retirement preparation, not because the interest rate is too high. The same is true for businesses. They're piling up cash because they lack the confidence to invest under the current conditions, not because of borrowing costs. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
There have been a lot of reports of China's slow growth dealing a blow to the global economy. Now, Anne Kruger, professor at Johns Hopkins University and the IMF's former deputy managing director, says another risk factor is the current situation in the European Union. Kim Min-ji shares with us Kruger's insights.
The crisis in the Eurozone stands as the biggest downside risk facing the global economy this year. That's according to Anne Kruger, the former first deputy managing director of the IMF, who says there are many challenges that could shape the fate of the European Union in the months to come.
While the situation in Greece is not immediately critical, there are still chronic issues in that country which could turn to crisis, but it's by no means over. Ukraine has difficulties, as we know, both economic and geopolitical. And in the rest of the Eurozone, there are difficulties that must be resolved. The British are slated to hold an election on whether to stay in the European Union or in June, and there is considerable uncertainty as to what the outcome will be. Refugee crisis, which is, of course, very big and constitutes a fundamental challenge to the Europeans and to their unity.
Kruger, currently a professor at Johns Hopkins University, said the outlook for the rest of the world doesn't look so rosy either, with faltering global commodity prices and a slowdown in China tugging on the global economy. She said we are living in a two-track world in which recovery and recession coexist.
On one hand, the outlook for the American economy and a few others is good, as I said. While on the other hand, there are a large number of countries whose prospects are much poorer. While there are a few countries in the middle, their near-term future will be determined in significant part by the balance between the expansion of the countries doing well and the recession or the slowdown or the stagnation, call it what you will, in the countries that are doing badly.
On a more positive note, the former policymaker said that the American economy continues to improve, and if it sustains its momentum, it may have an impact on the global economy down the line. But she also noted that the U.S. is not as dominant as before, and that it too is affected by global uncertainties. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The right to be forgotten. It's an issue that came to the fore a couple of years ago when a man won the right to have his personal information removed from Google's search results. Now, a South Korean government body has announced that it's putting together an official set of guidelines on the issue and how one can protect this right. Right to be forgotten versus the public's right to know. Our news feature tonight with Kwon Jang-ho.
The Internet. It's a never-ending and ever-expanding digital space where information can not only be stored indefinitely, but also retrieved from anywhere and by anyone in the world. For example, I did a quick search for my name to see what came up.
Just by typing in my name, some information about myself, such as social media accounts and pictures, pop up right away. But what if I want to block or restrict such access? That's what the right to be forgotten is about, and it's a rising issue amongst the global community.
The right to be forgotten is a concept that questions whether an individual has the right to remove personal information and content from the internet. It became a global issue in 2010 when Mario Costella Gonzalez lodged a legal complaint against Google to remove search results about an old auction notice for his repossessed home. In 2014, the European Court of Justice ruled in his favour, ordering Google to remove any links to articles related to the auction notice. Since then, the number of people around the world who are looking to erase their digital histories has risen considerably. In Korea, a new business service called Digital Laundry has hit the market. It removes unwanted personal content from the web. ForgetMe is one such company, and they receive dozens of calls a day.
Whether the clients themselves put up the content or whether someone else did, they come to us looking to have that part of their past erased from the internet. Recently, there has been a wave of people who have had their profile pictures stolen from social media sites and used elsewhere in inappropriate ways.
A key component to the right to be forgotten is protection from potentially damaging information.
Private footage of my partner and me having sex was uploaded without my permission. I tried to get it taken down, but it keeps coming up again and again.
Years ago, I posted a malicious comment on a website. Potential employers have found it, and it's made it hard for me to get a job.
When anyone can be subject to damaging material on the internet, what does the public think about the right to be forgotten?
Naked or indecent photos definitely need to be protected by means of the right to be forgotten.
In my opinion, the way people use their internet in Korea can be quite naive. If the right to be forgotten law is passed right away, then I think it could cause a lot of controversy.
In Japan, cases have already started going to court. It was recently discovered that in December, a Japanese court ruled in favor of a man who was demanding Google to remove 3-year-old news reports of his arrest in connection to child prostitution and pornography. The judge concluded that one's right to be forgotten should be recognized after the passage of time, and criminals are entitled to have their private lives respected and their rehabilitation uninterrupted. In Korea, a government body, the Korea Communications Commission, has said it will introduce guidelines this year outlining the circumstances in which people can claim the right to be forgotten. But cases like the one in Japan are expected to spark national debate.
So far, no specific regulations have been drawn up. It's a new field of debate, so we'll have to take examples from abroad and previous legal precedents to put together new regulations.
Fair accusations against an individual, plain criticism against a government, there's always the risk that this kind of content can also be targeted and erased arbitrarily. If this happens, then journalistic freedom and freedom of expression will be affected.
The KCC says the guidelines will not ask the press to censor any content, but it will make portal sites and search engines remove unwanted information, similar to the kind in Gonzalez versus Google case. How to strike that balance between an individual's right to be forgotten versus the public's right to know will require careful consideration, and it's something that individual countries and the global community will have to solve together. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Well, it certainly feels like spring is in the air. It's much warmer here in Seoul compared to last weekend when I left for Japan on a reporting assignment. Well, let's find out what the weather has in store for us for the rest of the week. Our Lee Ji-hyun is live at the Weather Center. Ji-hyun, good to see you again.
Welcome back, Ga-ryung. Now, the cold snap eased today, and the weather was generous enough for new starters settling into school life, as today was the first day of the spring semester here in Korea.
Wow, time just flies, doesn't it? I mean, but many people still went out this morning bundled up from head to toe. So I guess this morning was quite chilly here in Seoul. Do we need to do the same tomorrow morning?
Well, I would say so. It's going to be milder than this morning, but still quite chilly, kicking off at 3 degrees Celsius here in Seoul. But by the afternoon, it's going to top off at 13. But parts of Gangwon-do province could see a mix of rain and snow early in the morning, while the rest of the country can have partly sunny skies throughout the day tomorrow. But dusty conditions are in store for some areas of Gangwon-do province and northern parts of Gyeongsang-do provinces, while the capital area could also see dust levels going up by the evening hours. On that note, let's move on to tomorrow's temperature readings. Daily low will kick off at 3 degrees Celsius here in Seoul, 0 for Daegu, and Busan and Jeju will start out at 6 and 7. And as for the daily highs, Seoul will top out at 13, 17 for Daegu, while Busan and Jeju should see a high of 16. Now that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that is our broadcast on this Wednesday night. I'm Moon Gon-young. Thank you as always for watching, and we hope to see you right back here same time tomorrow on NewsCenter.